Nat. So, once again, you seem to have landed yourself in a bit of hot water over stuff that you've written on the internet.
Seems to be the case, yeah.
Yeah. Not the first time, but this is the first time you're actually being taken to court.
That's right, yeah.
Right. And it's already been commented before, but worth pointing out at the beginning of the interview, you're being charged not with, as opposed to some people seem to think out there, not with hate speech, not with incitement or any of this new legislation. The article of law specifically is misuse of electronic equipment and declaring your intention to commit a crime. With a possible maximum penalty of 2 fines of €25,000. And that's pretty serious. Let me start with this. People have already commented how the police are kind of really taking your case bis serietà, and yet other instances have not been followed with anywhere near the same level of determination. Let me just ask you, do you think there's a reason for that? Do you think that you're a bit of a soft target in terms of how the police handle such cases? You're one guy on your own.
Yeah.
Over to you. Yeah. Do you think you're being picked on specifically for that reason?
I mean, I can't obviously speculate about the intentions of the police. I'm not privy to the way they work, but I mean, in terms of whether I'm a soft target, I would say possibly yes, because I'm just one person, I'm an individual, I don't have a media organization, with a team of lawyers behind me and so on. I'm just someone who writes funny stuff on the internet.
Sure. Let me just ask you, why do you think that this case has been taken so seriously?
I mean, honestly, I don't know.
Okay, let me make the question a bit easier then. Do you think it has anything to do with the nature of the person who's pressing the charges? We're talking about River of Love's Gordon Parchman. Has obviously got a following. It remains a fact that this case originates from a report filed by this person, and it is being taken seriously. Do you think that people like, that the person in question, River of Love, let's stick to the organization, wields a certain amount of power in this country?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but, Mr. Mancher, as any citizen does, has every right to feel aggrieved. Whether going to the police was the right course of action for him is, debatable, but here we are.
Okay, so the original, before we got to the part where, you threatened to carpet bomb Bujibba and all that, you started by comparing or arguing that River of Love should be treated in the same way as ISIS, should be regarded in the same way as ISIS. Let's start with that. I mean, this is what he was so aggrieved about. Now, first of all,
if I can correct you,
sure.
that post did not come up in any when I was questioned by the police. It would nowhere was it mentioned.
Okay, fair enough. But it was the origin of how
it was the original, yeah. But the specific comment was the one about Bujibba that I was questioned on, that apparently Mancher has reported. But
Right. So you're talking about this in the police station when you're being questioned.
Sorry,
you haven't been questioned yet.
Yes.
Police. Oh, yes.
Specific.
Okay, I didn't know this. Yeah. Okay, great. But let's take it back to how it all started. People out there are questioning: is it really legitimate, to make that kind of comparison? And I can see obviously two sides to that answer. But let me hear it from you. I mean, how that could be taken seriously, unlike the carpet bombing. I mean, were you being serious up to a point over there? Do you see these sort of religious organizations as being comparable in any kind of conceivable way?
So I think the context of the post is important as well. So it was a few days after the murder of Paulina Demska. As for what I meant with the comment, the intention behind it was that I meant that, this group should be seen as dangerous. Obviously, there was a bit of hyperbole there, they're not going around committing terrorist acts, but they are problematic. I don't think I am the first one to note the problematic nature of some of the things they do. But yeah, I would say I think it's my right to have that opinion.
Yeah. And the problematic nature of some of what they do. I mean, there is a bit of an irony in the circumstances it's evolving, because the reaction to your comment was that it was deeply, deeply unacceptable. But these are the same people who talk about gay conversion therapy and who express intolerance to people. Do you see this as playing a role in what's going on here?
I do find it a bit ironic, to be honest.
Yeah. The sort of thing that you would come up with as a satirist. But
Yeah, some people have commented that they thought it was a Bisseriata headline.
yes, I was one of them, in fact. Now, let's start. I mean, it invites us to consider the kind of the distinction, the demarcation line between what counts as satire and what counts as regular commentary. On this occasion, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was not satire. This was not something you actually said as a bis seriata headline. This was you talking in your own capacity, commenting online. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it was my personal profile. One thing I will say is that, you don't have to have a satirical website to make a satirical comment.
No.
I think that's I was, in the comment in question, I was using the tools of satire, irony, and hyperbole to make a point and make a joke, really, because at the end of the day, this is what it was. It's a joke.
Sure. As jokes go, this one, it didn't go down too well with the people. It was intended. But let's start with that. I mean, okay, there is this difficulty staring us in the face. Some people out there took you kind of literally. If not that you, obviously, I don't think anyone in his right mind thought you actually wanted to hire planes and bomb Puyeba. A little bit too expensive, if nothing else. But there was this idea that you were expressing something that could be interpreted as hate speech. I mean, do you see that as a possibility? Can you see how other people, I'm not talking necessarily River of Love themselves, because they have a kind of vested interest. People out there really would say you might have crossed the line. Do you feel that you crossed the line, just out of curiosity?
No.
No.
And I would say, as to the difference between satire and hate speech, I would say that satire, one of the general, most sort of common definitions of satire is, or the purposes of satire, is to punch upwards. So
you had said that in an interview once with me.
Before
all this happened. But
I remember.
Yes.
Last year.
Quite right.
It's speaking truth to power, holding power to account. One definition of it that I read recently that I really liked is that satire comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. Whereas obviously hate speech sometimes can be a bit hazy in terms of the definition, but I think in general hate speech would be directed to people who are vulnerable, people with protected characteristics, such as sexuality, race, and this kind of thing.
The fact that River of Love is, for example, a religious organization, some people, and that would include presumably ISIS. I can see the comparison unfolding. But yes, religious organizations tends to be very sensitive when it comes to these things. They would argue that we are the vulnerable ones. We're the minority. How would you respond to that?
I would respond. I mean, it's like if I made fun of the Catholic Church. I mean, I think in terms of like if I had to look at my Bisseriat articles, obviously this was in my personal capacity, so it's slightly different. But I think the number of articles I've written about the Catholic Church as opposed to River of Love, I think the proportion is heavily in the church's skewed towards the church. And just because something is an organized, I mean, it's in the name. It's an organized religion. It's like these are institutions with sway and with influence and with a certain amount of financial backing as well. So. Yes. I think I think the difference is that if I were to go after one individual from River of Love, that would probably be problematic. But I think going, commenting on them as an institution, I think is acceptable, given also their public profile as well. This isn't some small little church in a garage, This is a well-known organization.
Yes, and it is influential. Interesting you said that you went after one individually. You actually ended up going after, satirically speaking, 12,112, if I'm not mistaken. That's the population of Bujibba. Because, let's face it, there's another dimension to your comment, and it is Bujibba. Yeah. Now, you reminded me a bit of, I'm just pulling this out of a hat now, it just occurred to me. The Italian arts critic who was very outspoken, his name is currently not coming to me. There was an eruption of Mount Etna, which was threatened to destroy large parts of Catania. And he said, good, because those buildings are so ugly, they deserve to be... I'm going to kick myself for not remembering his name. Sgarbi, Vittorio Sgarbi. Now, Isn't this also part of what the satirical nature of your comment? You weren't just talking about River of Love there, were you? You were also talking about the uglification and the urban sprawl.
I mean, if anything, I think if there's a party who should feel aggrieved, it's the people of Bujibba.
Yes, totally.
Honestly, no, it's just, it's so silly that it's kind of, even when I was questioned by the police, it just felt so surreal, I mean,
Out of curiosity, how did the police approach the questioning? Were they dead serious with you?
I don't think they were particularly happy to be in that situation. Let's put it that way.
So
that's not the impression I got.
So the actual police who were interrogating you seemed like they were acting on orders, then presumably.
I mean, I can't say that,
yeah,
but
okay.
they, I don't think. I mean, they're police. They have more important work to be doing, I think, and I think they recognize that too.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to the difference between satire and free speech. Now, Everard Bartolo, former education minister, somebody who's got a bit of a role to play in his perspective does have a certain weight. And he said that the democracies are valued according to how much they tolerate, I'm obviously rephrasing from memory, how much they tolerate satire and prickly comments was the exact words he used. And I rather like that way of putting it. Now, first of all, your comments are prickly, let's face it. They don't seem to be tolerated very, very, very openly. What does that tell you about Maltese democracy? It's something that you've kind of, I noticed in your satirical bent of Bissarietà that this is an underlying, ongoing theme. But you seem to be suggesting that Malta's not kind of ready, culturally perhaps, to accept a certain type of satire. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I mean, I think one telltale indication of that is that I'm the only one who does what I does, really. I mean, obviously there are other satirical vehicles in the country, generally brought on theatre and broadcast, but in terms of and I think sometimes they maybe don't go as hard as I do a lot of the time. I would say, I think in terms of the problems of Maltese society in relation to this is that possibly, I think as a society we tend to take ourselves a bit too seriously. And I would say maybe certain people have a bit of a inflated sense of their own importance. And I think another issue that we have in Malta is the concept of irony is a bit not fully understood. As in, by that I mean the idea of saying something the idea of saying something you don't mean, or saying something that has the opposite meaning of what you're saying, or something that has a bit of a hidden meaning. I mean, obviously, I can't generalize. I mean, Bissarietà does have a healthy following, but it is obviously a minority of the Maltese population.
If I could just build on that a bit, it's not just because the suggestion there is that people might not get irony. But let me change that around a little bit. Let's say that they do get irony perfectly well, but they just don't like it when you point your ironic fingers at things that they like. Politics is a good example. Now, you said earlier, you're the only one who does what you do. I mean, I can see what you mean in terms of online satire.
Yeah.
But does that include, for example, making fun of all sides? This is something you seem to pride yourself on a bit. You kind of there is no target that you won't touch because is that how you see it? I mean, as long as it hits out indiscriminately at all sides.
I mean, obviously, so I like to think of it as equal opportunities piss taking. But obviously, I've been asked this question a lot, specifically in regard to politics, and especially the two parties, like partisan politics. And I think that number one, I don't have any. This is my website. I don't have any obligation to be what's the word? Neutral or unbiased, or no. And
I don't think you can as a satirist.
Yeah, and I think obviously when it comes to at the end of the day, the government and the opposition don't have the same executive power. It's the government of the day that has the power to make decisions and so forth, and laws and what have you. Then it's a question of, if I were to say, eventually in 100 years, at the rate we're going, if PN were to be back in power, and I stopped making fun of the government, then that would obviously, that would be fair criticism. Oh, he's biased and what have you. In fact, it was kind of interesting. I remember after the 2013 election, when obviously Labour came into power after 25 years or what have or so of PN. It was a bit difficult for me because like over the so I started Beserita in 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously in those 2 years, no, it feels sure. I think PN were in government for longer than that. Anyway, I started Beserita at a certain time when PN were in government. Obviously,
we can clarify this. PN was in government from 1987 to 1996.
Yeah, but with
1998 to 2013.
It was 13. Yeah.
And it works out to 25 years. You were right.
Right. Yeah.
Give or take a few months.
Maths.
So
no, the point that I was making is I had obviously a lot of jokes about certain PN ministers and PN personalities. And then, 2013 comes along, you have this totally new group of people who, so I had to kind of reframe in a way of like, okay, like it's kind of starting from a blank slate. I don't have those tropes and those sort of stereotypes of what ministers, it's like building a character of a minister, it's like a comedy character.
Well, you've been given quite a lot to build your repertoire from 2013 to today.
It's been wild, yeah.
Interesting. I hadn't thought to ask this question, but now you've brought it up. I mean, okay, so you caught the tail end of the Nationalist Party as a Beserita sort of satire. That's the only Beserita satire. And you had all these years with Labour. How do you compare the 2 eras? It's from a satirical point of view. How much more is there to take the piss out of from one side to the other?
It's a bit difficult because obviously I have 2 years of one and 10 or 11 years of
yes, but you also have you can look back at the 25 years with your satirical mind and see what there was. Yeah.
It's a bit of I need to think about that a bit. Obviously, like the things that under PN, the thing that sort of brought Beserita to the fore was the divorce referendum. Yes. That gave me a really good launching pad in a way because it happened to coincide around the same time. In terms of, obviously, the thing that sticks out is that under PN there were no ministers or what have you that outed me, whereas
yes, that's right.
Under Labour there was one particular one.
That's right. Yes.
That stands out.
There is an irony though. Okay, coming back to that Evarist Bartolo quote, and Evarist Bartolo obviously, I need hardly say was a Labour minister, is that Labour prides itself on championing freedom of expression, and yet these things are happening under a Labour government, and they're not very particularly tolerant of criticism, are they? And is this something that I'm just going to ask you this? Do you see this as getting kind of worse over time? Because I'm getting the impression that in actual fact, despite all these recent legislative changes, there are more restrictions on what you can say today. Would you agree?
I don't know about that. In a way, I think as an individual speaking globally and locally as well, I don't think there's ever been a time where you can say as much as you can say now. Obviously, context is key, you have to write stuff within context. Even on Beserita, I measure my words and, sometimes I'll come up with a headline and I'll think, oh, this might be a bit too much. And then I'll share it with a couple of friends who I think of as a good barometers of sort of my, they know my style of comedy, they share a very similar style of comedy. So sometimes I will put something to them and be like, too much?
Yeah, but the people you're talking about, I won't ask for names, are people who are similar to yourself, I would imagine. So do you feel, okay, but that makes them a bit niche in an environment where the sort of comedy that we're used to, that people tend to like, is different from this. Let's face it. There is a tendency to laugh at slapstick comedy in Malta. Candid camera in the old day was very, very, that kind of thing. Now, you posted a comment recently which caught my attention, is that, Malta has no real excuse for that because we were brought up watching, top-notch British comedy, Fawlty Towers, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I mentioned this with Colin Fitz in my last
Italian satire as well.
Italian satire. Swiss has a huge influence. None of this seems to have rubbed off, at least certainly on TV. This was a point you made. I happen to agree with you. But I was going to ask you, do you see a correlation between the fact that our comedy is kind of how it is, it doesn't quite aspire to the same heights of what we're brought up watching, and the lack of tolerance for this kind of comedy to begin with?
I think it's a a cultural issue of, I think obviously Malta for a long time. I think there is an aspect of Malta's colonial history there as well. I mean, maybe talking out my ass here a bit, but like, I think Malta has always been subject to quite an amount of censorship, whether that's from the Catholic Church or the British or the Knights or what have you. So I think these things, I mean, the British humour didn't develop overnight. There's thousands of years of tradition of humour and satire and what have you. And I think it's just the case of we're a bit young as a country, and I think it is a question of resources as well sometimes, to be honest, because to make these the shows that we're talking about, the ones that we loved, the Monty Python and all of this stuff, Fawlty Towers and Hyacinth, was it Keeping Up Appearances, what have you. They do take a certain amount of resources, and especially if it's something like TV comedy, that takes a lot of, you have to have a good script, good actors, good directing, good editing, good sound, what have you, good marketing. It does take a lot of resources.
Okay, but let me put it this way: those resources are available for other productions. Do you feel that comedy is not given the importance it deserves locally?
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's something, as I'm saying, I think it's something cultural in that we don't really value comedy. And I think something as well, we don't really like laughing at ourselves really as a country. And that's something I get a lot on, Biserieta comments, if I make fun of, I don't know, the ugliness of a town or whatever, there's a lot of offense taken, I mean, a lot of people find it funny, and don't get me wrong, Biserieta has over 35,000 followers on Facebook, so like I'm saying, it's not a small audience. It is, but it is at the end of the day niche.
It's bigger than the population of Bujipa.
Just as it
if it comes to all-out civil war, you've got the American advantage.
I've noticed like a huge drop in followers from Bujiba. Like it's no. It is interesting though. Sometimes when I write about something particular, I can't remember the last one. I think it was. I can't remember. It was a particular joke, and the amount of there was a noticeable drop in followers.
I mean, there must be certain taboo subjects which go beyond religion. I mean, football must be another dicey thing to write about.
Yeah,
in a country where people.
I did actually. I am remembering. I made a post and took a pop at Inter.
There you go, for example.
Yeah, that did it.
Death threats?
No, it's quite. I don't think I've ever received an explicit death threat. I was
coming to the question.
I've received things that are sort of like on the border of a death threat, but never something particular.
No, obviously, coming back to the case, because let's not forget the case. But people are arguing, and the very fact that you're being charged with the crimes that you're being charged with suggests that people took that as some people at least. Gordon Moncher, certainly, took that as a death threat. Now, I mean, in a country where we are no stranger to death threats, let's face it, there have been, and some of these threats have been carried out recently, as we all know.
Yep.
I mean, do you, again, let me just put it to you, I mean, you yourself seem conscious of, being careful to avoid, and yet here you are over the stick. I mean, do you have any comment to make about that? I mean,
well, I mean, I'd like to reiterate that I think the hyperbole, the exaggeration in the comment is clear.
Yes.
Now,
because it was the same question I asked you earlier. So let me rephrase it. Do you think people are deliberately misinterpreting you? Just to hit back.
I think there is an element of that. Yeah, I think it's a case of we are. I mean, I can in this whole exchange on Facebook, there was one particular comment from someone who is apparently a River of Love member who was like, sort of tauntingly saying, oh, this is a crime, and you should be careful, with your words and what have you. And I, at the time, suggested, listen, I don't have access to long-range strategic bombers, so no, this is not a threat.
And then going back to the police interrogation, did it go along these lines that you have to actually specify that you hadn't placed an order for some, what are they, Boeing, what are the actual big...
B-52s,
B-52s,
I believe, is the bomber of choice.
That's right,
good old American engineering. I honestly didn't think to. I think I took it for granted that I think I should have, mentioned
No,
it.
because on
But
on the basis that they're charging you on Article 49, which is the intention to commit a crime. I mean, did they actually ask you any questions about how you intended to
No,
carpet bomb?
not that I recall. No, the question
yeah.
was just, what did you mean by the comment, which I've explained to you in this
Interesting.
interview.
Maybe kind of the court case now. So there's another dimension to this, which is there's a sort of mismatch of resources, isn't there? I mean, you said it yourself. You're a single person with a website, and you have to defend yourself against. Now, how much of a bearing do you think this is going to have on the case? I mean, you are collecting money for how's that going?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. If anyone else wants to chip in, you can do so at what is this, 2000? Bisserieta.com/donate.
It will help to get the website right if you want.
You don't need to say www these days.
I know, to be honest, it's amazing that people can actually still say it without the I end up stuttering it. What are your, how hopeful are you of winning this case? What kind of advice are you being given by lawyers?
Shut the fuck up, man.
Really?
No.
No, but I mean, they actually told you to stop writing this kind of stuff? Because
No. I mean, I can't be anything but confident because I think, I don't know, I'd find it a bit shocking if it were to go, all the way, kind of, and yeah. I don't want to comment too much
but
on.
there's, I mean, this might be part of the intention, You're facing a possible €50,000 fine, which you obviously can't afford. You have to pay lawyers, which you have to ask for people for contributions to pay. So, it all boils down to, I mean, you're saying that you're very confident you're going to win, but you still have to fork out quite a lot of money just to be able to do that. And let's face it, it's not even guaranteed. I don't want to dampen your optimism.
No, nothing's guaranteed.
But, it is a law system, a legal system. There are judges and magistrates. The magistrate might be in a bad mood. You never know. You might have taken the piss out of him or her.
I can confirm I haven't.
Okay.
I hadn't heard of her. So
great.
That's
Yeah, but
that's
you know what I mean. So it's a sort of question of, I mean, I'm pleased to see that you're so confident. But I mean, at the end of the day, there are, even the prosecution is wasting national resources on this case. So, I don't want to repeat the same question again, but I mean, do you feel that there's more than just the legality of the case involved, and there might actually be a vested interest in making you lose this case?
I mean, again, I'm not in a position to comment. I don't know, and I mean, what I can say is, just to repeat, I can't be anything but confident. Although, having a court case against you is a bit of a burden. It's a weight. At the end of the day, I can be as cheerful and hopeful as I like about it, but it's still there. It's still.
Is it the last question I'm going to ask you? Is this going to change the way you actually write in the future?
Probably not.
But the probably was significant. I mean, is there a danger you might reach a point where you say it's just not worth the hassle? And if so, that would be a stifling situation, and it would be a kind of chilling factor.
I have absolutely no intention of changing the way Bisserieta operates. Whether I want to examine how I communicate on Facebook is something that I could consider, but probably won't because I'm incorrigible.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks.